So the order will be Tom Conroy, then Catherine Alexander, who's the political director for Very Fine Gold, will be speaking on his behalf. Then Deb Goldberg, Maura Healy, and Warren Tolman. So Tom, why don't you come tell us about yourself and why you should be treasurer? Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Democrats, for coming today. Really appreciate the opportunity to share with you, and I hope to listen and learn to some of your priorities and concerns. My name is Tom Conroy. I'm a state rep. I've been a state rep for the past 8 years. I'm from Wayland, just up the road on 126. I live there with my wife and our 4 daughters, 3 of whom are triplets. I am being supported in this race by a couple of local state representatives, Carolyn Dykema being one, Jeff Roy another, Tom Santacandro. I'm just trying to think of all the different folks. People are from Ashland and Framingham and Holliston and Hopkinton, Medway, etc. So if you want to ask more about me, you can always ask them. I am running for state treasurer because I believe that Massachusetts should be a commonwealth of equal opportunity. A place where folks who are working hard and playing by the rules have a chance to move up and move ahead in life. A place where economic justice becomes a reality. That's becoming more and more difficult in today's society. Our economy has changed. Those middle-class jobs aren't there like they used to. And for too many families, that ladder of success is out of reach. Well, I am running to use my educational background in business, economics, and finance, my private sector experience, the work that I've done as a state rep for the past 8 years, the tools and the authority of the Treasurer's office, to open up educational and job opportunities for everyone throughout the Commonwealth so that people can move up and move ahead. Now, I've done that through most of my life, and I'm going to talk about that in a sec. And if we can do that, if we can rebuild the middle class this way, we can strengthen our economy and make Massachusetts financially strong far into the future, which of course is one of the things the Treasurer is concerned about. But it's also very personal for me. See, I did not grow up a child of privilege. When my dad came back from Vietnam, he came back to a very small house with 8 boys bouncing off the walls and a wife he hadn't seen in 13 months, who desperately needed a break. But he couldn't give her one because he had no job, no savings, and no income. But through hard work and honesty and integrity, taking out some loans, both to put food on the table and then to afford to give me a college education, Mom and Dad succeeded, and we lived a decent life. I used that education to go down to Washington. I worked for a couple of great Democratic U.S. senators. I spent 5 years in places like Thailand and Hong Kong and Laos and Cambodia and Haiti, helping refugees, some of the most disadvantaged folks in the world, get better opportunities and a better life here in the United States. And what I learned through that experience is that the best social safety net program, the best opportunity creator we can offer anyone, any family, is a good, steady job with good wages and decent benefits. And where does that happen? It happens in the private sector. And so I furthered my education in international economics. I got an MBA in finance. I spent 16 years in the private sector, helping create new products, new services, new jobs, and new opportunities for people. I also worked with state agencies as a consultant and brought best practices from financial management and information technology to grow state agency and municipal budgets so that more social workers could be hired, more school teachers could be hired, so that government could do what it does best, provide help to those who need it and provide a great education to all of our kids. And I did this all around the country. And I want to bring that expertise of generating non-tax revenue at state agencies throughout the Commonwealth so that we can have a better, bigger, stronger government, because government does do good for people. As a state rep, I have lived and breathed and offered amendments and bills and legislation and written laws to help some of the most disadvantaged folks in life. I've authored a bill to address poverty, restart that conversation 50 years ago. We started the war on poverty. We haven't won that war yet. We need to do that. I've authored a bill and brought it to the floor and championed it, managed the debate on it, beat back Tea Party amendments to help single moms move from welfare to work so that they could get the kind of education, training, workforce skills development, and get a good, steady job. And as important, the kind of subsidized child care that they need so that once they get a job, they can stay in it, knowing that, knowing that their child is being cared for. I'm the champion up on the House side of the minimum wage bill. Brought that to the floor, authored that bill, beat back 80 Tea Party Republican amendments that tried to undercut putting more money into the hands of working families. I want to address income inequality through that bill, get it passed into law. We've got folks living in poverty, people, working full time. That's not right. We need to bring an end to that. What do I want to do as treasurer? I want to bring those democratic values. I want to bring my financial management expertise to bear on educational and job opportunities. So real quickly, universal pre-K education, big fan of that. Treasurer controls the school building authority. Let's renovate and build classrooms so that 3-, and 4-, and 5-year-olds can go to school and get a better chance to succeed in life. Let's remove that stranglehold of debt on our students who are trying to get a higher education. The treasurer has a role there, and I want to help more students finance their college education so that they're not drowning in debt. I want to do what Steve Grossman has done, put more of our Massachusetts taxpayer dollars to work in local banks. Those local banks can lend to local businesses, and they can create new jobs. These are some of the things that I want to do as your next treasurer. My name is Tom Conroy. I've got triplets. I'm running for treasurer. Thank you all very much, and I'd be delighted to take some questions.
Okay, Catherine Alexander, could you come on up and tell us about Barry Feingold, please? Happily.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not Barry Feingold. You probably could figure that out, though. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm so sorry that Barry's not with us. He's actually at a graduation in Pennsylvania for a very dear friend and is so sorry that he's not with us. I, however, couldn't be more proud to be here because I'm a Dover-Sherburne graduate, grew up in Sherburne, and played some awesome field hockey games on that field out there, so I drove in with some local pride. Anyway, I'm Barry's political director, and I couldn't be more proud to work for him. Growing up in Sherburne, I got to experience many privileges, like a great education. And Barry's story is one of hard work. He grew up in public housing in Boston. He moved up to the Merrimack Valley when his parents got public school teaching jobs there. And he has worked for every dollar in his pocket. He's a small business owner. His wife's a small business owner. And they have used their financial savvy and their progressive values to move forward Massachusetts every day. Barry has been working in the State House for almost 18 years. He first as a state rep and now as a senator. And it's those values that Barry experienced growing up and having to work hard that have really driven his political career. And as I said, for me, it's somebody who wants to make sure that not just the privilege I experienced growing up in Sherburne, but that everyone in Massachusetts has the same opportunity that I had. And that's what Barry's all about. Barry has supported the minimum wage bill every time it came to a vote in the Senate. Barry just moved forward an election law reform bill that is going to allow for same-day voting, same-day registration and pre-registration that just passed through the Senate. And it's those kind of values of ensuring equal opportunity to everyone that Barry's all about. I am in the back of the room and happy to answer questions, and I've got lots of information. I won't take up a second more of your time, but I hope you'll visit us at barryfeingold.com, and I'd be happy to talk to you or answer any questions. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I know it's the first gorgeous day we've had out, so I'm going to be as brief as possible because the sun actually has come out and I thought it was going to be a rainy day. I'm running for treasurer. Should I wait? I'm running for treasurer because I feel like, as you do, that government has an incredibly important role to play in people's lives. And I want to make a real difference. And I can do that in the treasurer's office. You know, the treasurer's office is a really large organization. It's got unclaimed property, cash management, debt management, managing and investing the $55+ billion pension fund. But I want to be a treasurer that invests in people. Economic empowerment, economic security, economic stability are not just buzzwords to me. They are a personal mission. My mother's great-great-grandmother came across the world to the north end of Boston with 11 kids. She opened a little grocery store. Every single friend and relative that arrived was given a job and had a roof over their heads. Her family, those families, grew, and eventually this became Stop and Shop. Stop and Shop was about jobs, secure jobs, not just for one, but 2, 3 generations. And I worked there, first as a member of 1445, and then again later as an executive after college, after Boston College Law School, and after receiving my MBA at Harvard. But we went through a takeover, and I saw a very different corporate model, and not one that I could live with. I'm the president of an adoption agency. I turn to issues facing women, children, and families. I was the founder of and the treasurer of a school for kids with severe cognitive disabilities, and I'm an advisor at the food bank. I know what an issue hunger is today, not just for people who live in the inner city, but Wellesley can't keep food on their shelves. So these are the kind of issues that I've cared about and I've delved into. But also, we didn't separate our progressive values from our business values. In 1961, I was Michael Dukakis' mascot when he ran for state rep the first time, and I've been an activist ever since. I ran for local office, became chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I'm an elected state committee woman. Trust me, I don't stay in Brookline during these cycles because I could pat myself on the shoulder and say, oh, we got a lot of Democrats elected out of Brookline. I go to places where it's difficult. Foxborough, Wrentham, where Scott Brown really does live. Poor Jean Shaheen. Please put money in that bucket. She's a good friend and I've worked hard for her. But the point is that's who I am. I work hard for Democrats. It's about getting Democrats elected and Democrat values. So I will go into the treasurer's office knowing how to do the business of the treasurer's office, the finance of the treasurer's office, but also from day one, wage equality will be in Deb Goldberg's treasurer's office. It's not just, thank you. It's not just a woman's issue. It is a family issue. If you have a mother, you have a wife, or you have daughters, it's your issue. And you know what? A fellow, a union guy from Winthrop said to me, it's my issue. I have a wife and 3 girls. It all falls on me. So we will make it happen. It will start from day one, and it will make lives better for people. I also intend to put a laser focus on a statewide financial literacy program. Just yesterday, a report came out that Massachusetts is graded F in financial literacy programs, and we need to begin with kids. Every kid who graduates high school should be literate in financial literacy. It's a must. We don't want to see folks fall victim like they did to the subprime mortgage crisis, and now Once again, we have to worry about the elderly with the new thing on the reverse mortgages coming back. And we will make sure that people have the skills to protect themselves. The power of the proxy. The $55+ billion pension fund. I will push with that power to make sure we have more women, more minorities, that it is a good business decision to make sure that the boards that these companies have, if they want our money, that they are looking at ways to do business in Massachusetts and that they have a greater reflection of our communities. Kindergarten savings plan. I intend to start a kindergarten college savings plan for all kids identified in the free lunch program and then expand it from there at no cost to the taxpayer. Kids are 7 times more likely to go to college. Today, that means a job because college graduates are now occupying the jobs that high school students used to get. I believe that my business background with my finance background and my values that we all share in this room, that I would be honored to be your treasurer. And we can work together to make sure that our government reflects who we are. If you're a delegate in June, I would love your vote. I would love your vote in the primary in September, and I look forward to us winning together in November and making sure that we have Democrats all the way down. Thank you so much.
So let's see, does anyone have any questions for our wonderful treasurer candidate?
Thank you very much for comment and for Deb. We are entering the casino era in Massachusetts, and I know you've been outspoken on your position on casinos, like your previous fellow Deb. What do you see your role as treasurer in taking care of the casinos, one way or the other?
Taking care of things.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually a couple of different roles. Maybe we need to explain to folks. So the treasurer does have a role. The treasurer has an appointment on the gaming commission. So one of the 5 members of that commission, and so the treasurer has a voice on that commission and what happens with casinos or not going forward. As you know, Parwas, and many of you know, I've been an outspoken opponent of casinos ever since I became a state rep 8 years ago. And was on the Economic Development Committee, needed to vote and evaluate on the governor's bill. Now, I'm the only one, I think, in the state that has done a cost-benefit analysis about whether or not casinos are good or bad for us. I concluded that it was not good. The whole industry was not good for us. And one of the more directly related issues to that the treasurer has responsibility over is the lottery. You can imagine that if we have casinos and slot machines all throughout the Commonwealth, that some people are going to be shifting their focus away from scratch tickets and gambling their dollars in slot machines. And that has a negative effect on the amount of local aid money, which is now about $950 million a year that goes back to cities and towns all throughout the Commonwealth. And that $950 million will be threatened, will be at risk, will be at peril because the money is shifting, the cannibalization is shifting over to the casinos and the slots. So the treasurer has responsibility for mitigating that loss and ensuring that cities and towns are not left holding the bag and facing further financial burdens. Cities and towns already have plenty of financial burdens that are unfunded mandates that I've learned about over the course of the past 8 years as a state rep that are putting an onerous burden onto the finances of localities. There's not enough money out there to pay for all this government services that folks want. So I want to put together a task force immediately after being elected in November that reports back to me right about this time next year on what can we do to mitigate that loss in lottery revenue. What other means do we have to protect the local aid that goes back to cities and towns? I'm going to implement some of those ideas, and I welcome them from all of you. Some of the greatest ideas that I have seen and heard over the course of the past 8 years come from constituents that I've been privileged and honored to serve. And you're all great Democrats. You care about these issues. I welcome your thoughts and your comments so that we can protect cities and towns on this. Thanks.
So I will not repeat because Tom and I are so much on the same wavelength on this. Number one, As chairman of the Board of Selectmen in Brookline, I obviously was very reliant on the lottery funds. But candidly, I'm not a big one about gambling. I feel that not only do the casinos impact people in a negative way, candidly, the lottery does too, and we know that. So one of the things that I want to do, and I feel, I will explain this a little bit better, but I feel that is critical, is that we look at what games in the lottery may prey on people who are susceptible to gambling addiction. And I think that's something that we need to look at. And the alternative also, understanding the critical nature of the unrestricted general funds that go to every city and town, I know that we need to have a robust lottery and that the casinos will impact that. I come from a background in business where we had less than 1% profit margins, and we worked in a unionized environment where we had brought in the unions ourselves. And I understand competition in that environment. I have already begun looking at, we know that the casinos are going to impact the lottery. In every other state it's happened, and even though the legislature tried to implement some things to cushion it, we know that. I mean, to be candid with you, the reason why we're dependent on the lottery is because long ago a deal was made, and in fact, our taxation policy here in Massachusetts forces this kind of decision-making on us, and I'm for a far more progressive form of taxation, and that's something that I hope we'll see the legislature look at moving forward, because to even have to make these trade-offs, to me, is unconscionable. But getting back to that, I am from the chain of distribution. What does that mean? I'm a retailer. I was a grocer. We're looking at the retailers, and for the most part, the Stop and Shops of the world can take a hit, but not the local convenience stores. Most of them are run by people who are immigrants, first-generation Americans. I speak their language. When I meet with them and talk to them, they know I'm going to be able to give them the kind of support they need in order for us to continue making sure we have a robust lottery. So I think it's great that we would have a task force and get marketing people together and all sorts of ideas, but from day one, prior to the casinos even being built, and I hope that they are not, prior to that, we will be working on ways to make ourselves competitive and strong so that we can take care of everyone within our communities. Thank you.
Is there another question?
I have a question. First a statement and then a question. I love the idea of every student should have their own education fund. We have the U Fund in Massachusetts, which is wonderful. It seems like every child born in Massachusetts should, almost like the birthright program. Congratulations, you have a child. We, as the state, gave you $100 from the lottery, opened up the U Fund, explain what that is, so that there's training on that. It keeps revenue in Massachusetts for our state schools to help build that. It would be really, this is like a no-brainer to me on that part. I don't know if that's something that you were thinking of, but it just seems like that would be a great way to go. That's one.
That's the statement.
Okay. And number two, if you are in the private sector and move into the public sector, and you have all your quarters in the private sector.
All your what?
If you met the Social Security requirement in the private sector, and now you're in the public sector because you believe in giving back, you end up getting burnt by giving back because you have now the retirement funds on both ends that you have contributed to. What can we do to change that in Massachusetts? I'm under the impression that this is only in 2 states in our country. They consider it double dipping, so when you retire, they will...
I know that.
Okay.
I think there's a couple of things. Number one, the messaging around state, people who work in the state and in public service is really bad. The Globe and the Herald hammer public employees. Public employees, and this may be the first you've heard of this, they pay 10 to 12% into the system and get 0
11%.
Social Security. Sorry?
11%. 11%.
I actually know some people who are paying 12 now.
Oh.
Yes. And get 0 Social Security. And if you have had a job in the private sector, you are reduced by the amount. This is wrong. And the treasurer needs to be speaking out on that and also working with the legislature on rectifying this. But it is really, really important that people get it, that those who work as public employees are paying into their system. And in fact, we need to, this year, the legislature decided to put money into the unfunded liability. But I have to tell you, in the private sector, if you are an employee and you pay into a 401k, and the person you're working for doesn't, that's actually against the law. And so we really have to be pushing the legislature to be more fully funding their obligation that is our obligation. People who are public employees provide services. They pick up our garbage. They plow our streets. They teach our children and put out our fires. So this is something that really needs a strong message from the treasurer, and I agree with you. We need to look at the legislation on how to balance that Social Security versus the retirement system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on the first statement with regard to the savings plans for kids, it is a great idea. I'm talking to some of the experts. There's actually a gentleman that I met with just recently who runs a nonprofit organization to do exactly this. Help kids when they're young, in kindergarten or in elementary school. Set up a savings account for their college education so that they understand the value of saving, they understand what a return on investment means, and they can set aside some money and understand the value of a college education and how much it costs. And I, of course, as I stated, want to help ensure that we remove those financial obstacles for students who are aspiring to get a college education by making it more affordable and not having that debt weigh them down and weigh the economy down, quite frankly, over the course of their future professional life, 10, 20 years after they get out of college. They should not be paying off these student loans the way they are right now. With regard to the issue, we already chatted about this issue, actually, and I'm a bit of a poster child for it with regard to the Social Security issue related to the pension funds. I worked 16 years in the private sector. I've contributed over the course of the past 30 years through employment. I don't know if you have, Deb, but I've contributed over the course of the past 30 years each year to the Social Security system, right? So I've put money in. Am I going to get that money out if I stay in public service? I've been in public service now for 8 years. If I'm fortunate enough to win, I've already made a public commitment to stay 8 years as treasurer. That's going to eat away at that Social Security money. So this is not just good policy and something that we should address. It's personal to me too. So I think I could be an extraordinarily strong advocate on behalf of this injustice so that people who have contributed in get back what they deserve and at the very least what they put in. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Is there another question? Judy.
All right. I'll be brief. I believe your department has control over investing state pension funds.
Correct, Judy.
And you make decisions about that, like where that money is invested.
Correct, Judy.
Would you talk to me about, or talk to us about your ideas of where that money should go, and particularly in the green industries?
Sure. So the question was, in case people didn't hear, is the treasurer is the chair of the Pension Reserve Investment Management Trust, so has some authority over how those investments are made on the $58 billion pension fund, as well as the Healthcare Security Trust Fund, which also needs a lot more money. And the question was, how are you going to invest that, and will you have an agenda that addresses, what did you say, the fossil fuel industry, basically the climate change issue? I am the chairman of the Labor and Workforce Development Committee up at the State House right now. What I've been compiling over the course of the past 15 months is a checklist of best business practices that includes not polluting, that includes paying more than a minimum wage, that includes offering decent health insurance, that includes making sure the workplace is safe and secure for all employees, that includes paying workers' compensation insurance and unemployment insurance, and doing all the things that the business community needs to be doing to be called a good business here in Massachusetts. And I want to take that list and those principles and those values that I think all of us believe in and use them to guide the kind of investment choices, Judy, that we make for that pension fund and that health care security trust fund. And it includes, as I said, anti-pollution efforts. And I am a co-sponsor up at the State House of a bill to divest our pension dollars from the fossil fuel industry. And I believe divestment works. When I worked down in Congress for Barbara Mikulski, a great U.S. Senator from Maryland who's still there, we worked together on divesting our all business activities and all pension funds and all interaction with the apartheid regime in South Africa. And it worked. Divestment worked. We saw regime change there. We saw Nelson Mandela get out of jail. We saw him take over as the leader of that country. So divestment can work, and I want to do that. I'll go one better though. Up at the State House, I'm the author of a carbon tax bill, the first of its kind in Massachusetts. So if we really want to address climate change, you can help elect me as the next treasurer so that I can advocate every day with the colleagues that are supporting me in this race, who will remain colleagues of mine at the State House in a sense, to further this idea of putting in place a carbon tax so that we can really address climate change, lead the rest of the nation, get everybody else on board to end this kind of pollution and protect our environment for our kids and our grandchildren and for centuries to come.
Oh, do you not want me to answer that, Judy? Because there is someone with their hand up in the back. All right, thank you. Well, first of all, I was very excited to hear Steve Grossman announce 2 weeks ago in Eastham that he supports, as treasurer, divestment of fossil fuels. So I'm hoping that along with the bill in the legislature and Steve Grossman before his term is over makes that happen. As someone who was involved in climate change Brookline from the very beginning, I know we have a problem with climate change. I was part of the initiative that began in the very early part of this, in 2001, 2002, and 3, of converting town vehicles to Priuses and putting in green buildings. The treasurer has the school building authority under its auspices. And I would like to find a way to give additional credits and help access credits for school buildings that can be more LED, more green in the future. In Brookline, I led the charge for our health department, and it wasn't gold, it was silver, but you know what? That was a start in the right direction. Myself, I've been driving hybrids for years and feel that I'm trying to do my part. We have a carbon footprint effort in Brookline, and we are all competing with each other to see how well we do. So I'm 150% behind you. I'm working with Mindy Luber. I've already told her that next January I will be attending the conference in New York City where we look at ways to invest in pro-green companies and how we move away from fossil fuels or companies that have any kind of fossil fuel underpinning. And yes, the proxy can be used for that, and we can influence that. The second thing I want to mention is the way in which I've been able to bring my practical business background and be able to get people on board to making decisions that make sense from a business point of view. One example, everybody's been to a town meeting, I'm assuming, in this room, and we know that it can go the gamut because it's not Democrats and Republicans, from very, very, very conservative people to the progressives like ourselves. I stood up in front of a town meeting and said, we need to make provisional employees permanent civil service status. Well, civil service, Romney tried to destroy it. He left it crippled, but it exists, and the right hates civil service. I presented it in a way that it was a good business decision, and everybody voted for it. That's the kind of credibility I bring to the business community. I came from a New York Stock Exchange business. It was one that had a conscience, though. I said we brought the unions in ourselves. All of these best business practices we instituted a long time ago. And actually, I was happy to attend, even though we aren't there anymore, and we did go through a hostile takeover because we wouldn't fire people. We were let go. We attended the 100 years of Stop and Shop this week in Quincy, and it was bittersweet because it's not the same, but What we were and who we were is what my values are and why I've turned to public service. And I bring that credibility from the business community and can talk their language in order to get things done. Thank you.
Okay, so Barbara Gardner has a question.
This is probably a very unfair question, but it's just bothered me in recent years because I think the chief role of the treasurer is to establish a good working relationship with a variety of financial institutions. And that wasn't true for many, many years. The treasurer stayed in place for a period of time and was able to establish those relationships. In recent years, it probably started with Joe Malone. It's sort of a jumping off point for governor. And I don't know, to me that makes no sense. So I wondered if you would like to comment on your expected longevity in the office?
Well, it's not unfair, Barbara, because this is what I hope to do for the rest of my career. And whether it's 12 years or it is 16, we have longevity in my family. My grandfather was in the stores till he was 85. My 60th birthday's tomorrow on Mother's Day. So this is what I hope, this is why I said it would be an honor to be the treasurer. I think it's one of the greatest jobs in the state. To be able to support the mass retirees, to the public employee unions, to be able to do the kind of investing and focus on using our proxy to move things forward, and just to be able to use my background in finance and my background in business to get things done. It's so meaty. Alcoholic Beverage Commission. I was the licensing authority in Brookline. I had a lot of experience in enforcement and how we prevent underage drinking. I am so excited about the possibilities of being treasurer. It's why I decided to run. It wasn't on my bucket list that I needed another statewide campaign. Folks asked me to look at it. And when I met with the chief of staff over at the treasurer's office and went through every department, because obviously I had worked with the lottery, with the school building assistants, with the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, but also focused on the business side, I said, this is something that I am incredibly excited about, and I feel would be an honor to serve all of you and make a difference in people's lives. So that's why I'm running. And so you've heard it from me. I have no interest in being governor. I don't want to be on the front page of the Globe or the Herald.
Thank you, Representative, for the question. I think I'm correct in saying that I'm the only one in this race who's actually worked in the financial services industry and worked with the banking industry, the insurance industry, investment managers, mutual fund companies, and unfortunately some of the hedge funds that I don't think are doing right by the economy. But the point is that I spent 10 years in that industry, and I do have good relationships with folks. I also see the dark side of that industry as well. But I would hit the ground running in terms of reestablishing those relationships. So I want to build an educational background, as I mentioned, international economics, MBA in finance. I've worked in the industry. I've still got a ton of friends in the industry. So I think it is important. One of the most important roles of the Treasurer's office is issuing bonds and bringing those bonds to the investment community to try to get the lowest possible interest rate, just like you folks would try to get a low interest rate on your mortgage. That's the Treasurer's job. Go out there into the banking industry and try to get a 2% rate, a 1% rate. I've authored legislation that the credit rating agencies point to as reasons why we now have the highest credit rating in our history in Massachusetts. Right? These are laws that are saving taxpayers tens of millions of dollars each year so that we can invest that money in other places like public health and education and fixing our broken infrastructure, right? So this is the kind of expertise that I'm bringing. These are the kind of relationships that I'm going to be able to hit the ground running with. I think these are some key differentiators in this race, and one of the reasons why I think I'd be a very good treasurer.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I think you got to. I've learned a lot about what the treasurer does, right? Has everybody learned things? Oh. The diehard in the back. Okay, all right.
But you guys have to keep it short.
Yes.
Because we gotta get out of here,
Yeah.
right? You gotta get out of here, right?
Okay, all right. Quick question.
I heard you mention that your committee is familiar with hedge funds.
Yeah.
I participated in the Middlesex retirement plan,
Yes.
and it's always interesting to see hedge funds as part of their investment. What would your position be on that? Thank you.
The education and the professional experience that I've gathered is that there's a lot of money being put into active investment managers. And over time, if we think about the long term, there's almost nothing that beats indexing. So I want to look at smarter investment choices that can actually save us money. There are index funds out there for almost everything that the hedge funds do right now. So that's one thing I want to look at in order to save more money, again, so we can put it into a place where government can do more good.
I will do this quickly also, out of deference to the committee. I presently am involved in the investment of funds with a strategy towards growth, but not too much risk. I have noticed that the Treasurer's Office has a small percentage invested in hedge funds, and these need to be monitored very carefully. My investment strategy is, from the beginning, we will be sitting down and looking at every single investment manager that's involved with the Treasurer's Office. We will be doing evaluations quarterly on how they are doing and how we are doing. I think that my strategy and my experience is why the mass retirees have endorsed me in this race, and they're pretty critical. So I'm excited to state that they are with me. They will be publicly announcing it this week, and they know my background, they know my experience in this. I have quite significant experience in it as of right now, and in particular, since the downturn in 2008 and 9, I've been involved in investing in a way that has regrown principal and developed income for these funds that I'm involved with. So this is what I will bring to the Treasurer's Office, and we will make it happen for retirees. That's who is so important in all of this. Thank you. Thank you for having us today.
So thank you, Tom, and thank you, Beth. And thanks everyone for coming. Come on up. Maura is running for Attorney General, so let's hear what you have to say.
I have short legs, I can't move. Sorry. Good morning. My name is Maura Healy, and I'm a Democrat running for Attorney General. The last 7 years of my experience in the Attorney General's office has shown me just how important it is that we have an Attorney General who stands up for people, gives a voice to especially those who are vulnerable, protects consumers and taxpayers, and looks to lead on issues of public safety, drug addiction, and gun violence in smart and innovative ways. These fights are about my values and who I am. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, grew up in a small town. My mom just retired from school nursing. Dad still teaches high school, coached sports, led his teachers union. I worked my way through high school and college waitressing, came down to Massachusetts for college, beneficiary of Title IX, got to captain my basketball team, and then set off for an unlikely professional basketball career. Look at me, I know. But I was a point guard. Point guards are sort of the quarterbacks of the team, leading the strategy, and that's what I did on the court. But I knew I wanted to be in a courtroom someday, which is why I returned to Massachusetts, Northeastern Public Interest Law School, and started my legal career. It took me to clerking for a federal judge, on to the Boston law firm of Hale & Dorr, and then happily, I was given an opportunity to take a 70% pay cut and join the Attorney General's office. And I gotta tell you, nothing made me more happy. I did that back in 2007, was named Chief of the Civil Rights Division. It was there that I built and led the state's case challenging the Defense of Marriage Act, a case that people said couldn't be won. We won, and we show the kind of leadership you can get from your Attorney General's office. It was there. In time, I was asked by the Attorney General to lead not just 1, but 2 bureaus, so I had responsibility for half of the attorneys and staff in that office. I led the teams in cases, taking on predatory lending practices, helping families stay in their homes by fighting unlawful foreclosures, fighting for people with disabilities, reaching the nation's first settlement agreement with Apple to make its technology accessible to people with disabilities. These are the kinds of things you get to do in the Attorney General's office, and it is why I am running to be your next Attorney General. We have challenges ahead. I want to take them on for you. We have a student lending crisis, and we need to combat predatory practices of for-profit schools that are raking it in on the backs of vulnerable students. We need to continue to be an advocate for women's access to reproductive health care. The first piece of legislation I worked on in that office was the state's buffer zone law. And I'm going to make sure that as Attorney General, women have access to needed reproductive health care and that no employer denies needed services based on his own personal religious beliefs. I'm also going to make sure that we tackle this real scourge of heroin and opioid abuse, and also the abuse and misuse of prescription drugs. You know what I'm talking about. It's affecting almost every family and almost every community here in this state. And I want to lead as Attorney General on that issue. I put out a plan earlier this week, receiving the endorsements of the Mayor of Holyoke and the Sheriff out in Western Mass, because they know I will be the person to lead on this issue, to advocate for needed resources for those seeking both drug addiction treatment, long-term stabilization, and also mental health treatment. On issues of gun violence, it's critical. We must do everything we can to stem the tide of gun violence. I put forward a comprehensive plan. I support smart gun technology, but we need a broader approach, looking at root causes, getting services to those who need them so that we keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, closing loopholes at private sale and gun shows going on around this state, and making sure that Massachusetts join the federal database reporting system, something we currently don't do. So finally, I'm against casinos. I think this is an issue that should get to the voters. And for me, as a consumer advocate, there is no place else to be. When I look at casinos, I see upticks in foreclosure, personal bankruptcy, addiction, public safety issues. So that's where I am. If we do see gaming in this state, though, trust me, you will have no stronger regulator or enforcer to make sure that people play by the rules and that the public is protected. AG's office is the people's law firm. I'm here to be your people's point guard. Ask for your vote in June at the convention for those of you who are delegates, and ask for your vote and support in September. Thank you all. Thanks for what you do to Democrats.
Okay, so Warren Tolman is also running for attorney.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Warren Tolman, and I'm running for Attorney General. This morning, I was reminded why I'm running. I went to the National Alliance on Mental Illness walk in Boston before I came here. And I talked to some of the people there who really don't feel like they have an advocate. You know, we have a law of the land called mental health parity, except we don't really fulfill the obligations of mental health parity. You know, people with mental illness number higher than the people with diabetes, with heart conditions, with cancer. Yet we're not putting the resources there. We need to do a better job there. So that's why I'm running for Attorney General, to place some focus, some attention on some issues that need to be addressed. And to call for a different style of leadership, type of leadership that is willing to push the envelope and draw attention to issues that others don't want to talk about. I grew up in Watertown. I'm the 7th of 8 kids. My dad was a railroad conductor, my mother a telephone operator. By the way, happy Mother's Day to all of you who are mothers and celebrate tomorrow. My mother was born on Mother's Day and died on Mother's Day, so tomorrow is a special day. And in between, she had 8 children, and that was quintessentially what she was all about. And I was the first in my family to go to college because my older siblings and my parents tried to impress upon me as the 7th of 8 to work hard and to stand up for what you believe in. I worked hard, and I like to think that along the way I've stood up for some important causes. When I was in the House and in the Senate, I took on some tough battles. I worked on early childhood education before it was accepted as a place where we should put more resources. I worked on domestic violence initiatives that address confidentiality program that you hear Secretary Galvin talk about, saving lives. That was my bill. I took on the tobacco industry. They were the big Goliath. on Beacon Hill. And they haven't been beaten in many, many years. And I beat them. The American Heart Association gave me their Statesman of the Year award. I also traveled around the country on behalf of the American Cancer Society. I really knew I was doing something good when Rush Limbaugh attacked me on national radio. He called me an anti-smoking Nazi. So thank you. I also worked on campaign finance reform. You know, if you read today's Globe, you see that the Koch brothers are funding an entity with $125 million to take control of the Senate. We lose as Democrats when it's about money. We win when it's about our values. As someone who ran as the only clean election statewide candidate in our state's history, I put my political future on the line because I really believe that the pernicious influence of big money and special interests on the political process is not good. It's not good for small d democracy, and it's not good for capital D democratic values. So, thank you. And I'm going to keep fighting that fight, taking on, you know, when Citizens United and the McCutcheon decisions come down, we need an advocate, someone who's going to stand up. Let me just talk about a couple issues, other issues that I'd like to focus on as your next Attorney General. One, the scourge of sexual assaults on our campuses. I put out a plan several months ago before it started appearing, it seems like every day on the front page of the Globe, to call a summit of all the colleges and universities in the Commonwealth and use my leadership skills to force them to implement best practices. Because I find it outrageous that in 2014, a young woman is more likely to be the victim of sexual assault if she goes to college than if she doesn't. Think about that. I want to make the best colleges and universities, and I think we have them here in Massachusetts, the safest. I also want to address the scourge of opiate addiction and mental health and substance abuse, and how that interacts with our criminal justice system, and do away with mandatory minimums for nonviolent drug offenders, because we're not giving these people an opportunity. 82% of them have a substance abuse or mental health issue. They go to jail, they get very little counseling, very little vocational assistance, and then they get out of jail. We expect them to come back and become productive members of society, yet we've equipped them with absolutely zero to do so. We need to stand up on those issues, and as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the Commonwealth, I will do so. I will also work to address the issue of gun violence in our communities. And finally, I think we can do a lot better job on consumer protection. Everybody knows the Treasurer's role as with the unclaimed money list. We know about Secretary Galvin's efforts to promote voting. I think we can do a lot better job informing the woman in Dorchester who pays a painter $5,000 never to see that painter again, that she has an advocate. She has someone to whom she can reach out and say, can you be with me? Thank you. Can you be my advocate? Can you be my fighter? As we look at these communities, and we got to really focus on communities of color, on communities for whom people have English as a second language, and on elderly. That's who these predators prey on. My 89-year-old mother-in-law doesn't want to answer the phone because of all these schemes that she gets hit with. The Attorney General's office ought to be front and center. A couple other issues. I have 2 daughters and 1 son. I have a real hard time that my 2 daughters are going to earn on average 79 cents on the dollar that my son is. I'm going to look for pay equity cases to challenge. And finally, I want you to know that when I'm your Attorney General, irrespective of your race, and your religion, your sex, your sexual orientation, you will have a fighter, you will have an advocate, you will have someone on your team. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Hello, Diana.
Hi. This is for you, Warren. You mentioned Citizens United and corruption of big money in politics. What specifically could you do about that really big problem in our democracy?
Sure. I'll stay here. We don't shift the mic. Specifically, well, first of all, you got to stand up. You got to use the bully pulpit that is the Attorney General's office to speak out on these issues. McCutcheon is the latest. There are going to be more. We're going to have challenges on mass laws. Obviously, the federal laws will affect the Massachusetts laws. The last campaign finance and ethics reform piece that passed on Beacon Hill, I was the chief sponsor of. I still think that we ought to go back to a clean elections type system. of publicly financed government in Massachusetts. 67% of the people in Massachusetts voted for that in 1998. It was implemented for 2002. I ran under it, obviously, and then the legislature would not appropriate the funding until we went to the SJC 6 times. Not the way, by the way, you want to run a campaign for governor, going to the SJC 6 times. So you want to advocate. When those bills come up, when they're looking for advocates on Beacon Hill, I will be there. I've been there in the past. But also, when there's an amicus brief to be filed with the Supreme Court or in federal court, the Attorney General's Office of Massachusetts, when I'm Attorney General, will have a seat at the table. We'll be in the forefront of this. I thought I was done in 2002 running for office because I knew it wasn't going to work out, but I felt I had to remain committed to the cause. So the fact that I'm back up here 12 years later, at it, hopefully having an opportunity to make a difference in public office really gets me fired up, and I'm much more willing at 54 to stick my neck out and try to challenge the status quo, move the system forward, make it about values, not about money.
Just a little background on this. I'll tell you what we've done already in the Attorney General's office on this issue. We did, in fact, file an amicus brief in the case that went up to the Supreme Court, Citizens United. We lost, but we did make the argument there in an amicus brief. We also got behind the effort here in this state to proceed with a constitutional amendment, which has to happen state by state. So the current Attorney General supports that. I certainly will continue to strongly support and advocate for that. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, though, as Attorney General. I'm going to, look, I'm a lawyer. I'm going to study the data. I'm going to make the case to the American people and to the people of Massachusetts about what needs to happen. Let's study the effect that money has had on individual elections the last few years since that terrible decision. And we will make the case, and we will shame those in Congress into making the right move to give them the political backbone to do what is necessary for the good of this democracy. It's a really important issue. I'm glad you raised it, and one that I will definitely continue to be focused on as Attorney General.
Judy.
Okay, hi, Ms. Healy. You're currently in the Attorney General's office. If you're elected, how will you differentiate yourself from the current administration?
Thanks. To be clear, I'm sorry. I left the Attorney General's office back in October. I resigned to run, so I've been working without a paycheck since then. Look, I'm really proud of this Attorney General's office in particular. I think this Attorney General has done a great job. I like her bureau chief appointments. But in all seriousness, I think we've certainly had some successes, and I'm looking to build on those successes. I think there are new opportunities. I put forward a plan this week to create for the first time in the Attorney General's office, first in its nation, a Child and Youth Protection Division, because I am really bothered by what we've seen here in this state. So that's one thing. It's going to be a new division to work and focus on the care and protection of kids across any number of issues, and to better coordinate care that they're receiving from our state agencies. I'm also going to lead a conversation as Attorney General on criminal justice reform. Remember, I'm the candidate in this race. I'm the only candidate in this race who's been both a civil rights attorney and a criminal prosecutor. So I think that that's a terrific conversation for me to lead as Attorney General, and that's one thing I'm going to set out to do.
Another question?
I have a question.
How would you be different?
So, I have not been a prosecutor, and I think that helps me to look at issues in a different way. And specifically, some of the things I want to do in the Consumer Protection Division in the Attorney General's office, where I once worked as a student, as a college student for a couple summers. I learned a lot, and that's where my interest in the law was really kindled. And I don't see that Consumer Protection Division serving the large numbers of people that it used to serve, and reaching out to people in a way that I thought it did under some of the predecessor attorney generals. I don't mean that as criticism of Martha. It's just a way in which we would place our priorities a little bit differently, because I think there are a lot of people out there that need an advocate, need an ally when it comes to consumer protection. Another area is the issue of gun violence. Specifically, we have regulations that were issued in 1998. They were challenged and went to the SJC in 1999. And it's clear that they can be strengthened to incorporate something called smart gun technology. Smart gun technology was available in 2000. Smith & Wesson wanted to market it, and the NRA and the other gun manufacturers said, no, 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 you can't sell that smart gun technology. This is the fingerprint technology that's on the gun handle. It allows, if it's your gun, recognizes your fingerprint, it allows you to pull the trigger, or you could have 5 people on it. There's also wristbands that talk to the gun, or a ring that'll talk to the gun if it's in close enough proximity. I call it seatbelts for guns. And I think we need to really update those regulations, which, by the way, you don't need any new laws passed to do. The Attorney General already has the authority. So I get that people don't want to take on the NRA. I want to make guns safer. Because every hour of every day, somewhere in America, a young child is injured as a result of a gun accident in the home. So yes, I am going to push the envelope on issues like this. I took on big tobacco, I'm going to take on the NRA, because it's about making our communities, it's about making our neighborhoods, it's about making all of us safer. So that's the way I'm going to be a little bit different. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is just a last minute question. It might be off topic. I hope it's not. You mentioned consumer protection. What about when people who work 9 to 5 are very busy in our jobs? We sometimes see fraud being done at the higher level, but we have no one to report it to because it's small dollars. So it seems like nobody is really interested in looking at it. But that to me is like the rot of our society. These are people who are in leadership positions causing fraud, stealing, not following the HR policy and procedure manuals. Who can we report these issues to? I'm not saying, creating a whistleblowing community, but it just doesn't seem right. And you hear about it only after it's become egregious in the paper, that somebody has stolen millions of dollars from a town or something like that. But that doesn't just happen overnight. People do see it and stay quiet.
So you're absolutely right. I call this the fraud tax. And it's a tax that we all pay. And it's in Medicaid, it's in misclassifying workers, it's in not paying taxes. There's a whole range of different areas in which this is engaged. I mean, the Attorney General, we have a hotline that's out there where people can call this stuff in, but it's not well known and it's not well advertised. People can do so anonymously and the like. So I think this is all part of reaching out and making the Attorney General's office the people's office. As I travel around the state, people think that the Attorney General's office is a glorified statewide DA. That's not the role of the Attorney General's office. 75% of the Attorney General's office is civil. 25% is criminal. So I think we need to do a better job. And by the way, this relates to cyber crimes, the loss of data, medical, financial, and otherwise. It relates to a whole host of other issues that are being underreported. And what we see is these practices, they percolate up so that they prey on, and if we think back to 2001, 2002, 2003, the mortgage scam artists, which were starting to go after communities of color, people for whom English was a second language, and the elderly. And it kept getting worse and worse. And if we had had an aggressive Attorney General's office looking at these issues, we might have been able to better discern patterns and practices of what was transpiring out there. We might have stopped some of these predators earlier on. This is completely consistent with what you're saying. Have an ear to the ground, have an ear to the community, listen to people, be informed by what you hear out there. Be out in the community. I don't want to come here in 4 years, hopefully as a candidate for re-election, and say, remember me, I promised to do X, Y, Z, that's it. I want to be in the communities, listening to people, because that's how you, as a former state rep, as a former state senator, that's how you become the best public servant, is by listening, going out, and finding out things. As I did this morning at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I talked to a couple people there. I was amazed by their stories. And it only reaffirms my commitment to public service that you go out, you talk to people, you're edified by it, and you're enriched by it. So that's part of the process.
Thank you.
It is such a core function of the Attorney General's office, and I oversaw the Public Protection Bureau, so I was responsible for all consumer, health care, environmental, insurance and financial services matters. And I'll tell you, back in 2007, when the lending crisis started, The Massachusetts Attorney General's office brought the first consumer protection case in the country because we were that far ahead on the issue. And Massachusetts, as a result, has become the only state where it's illegal now to make a mortgage to someone that you know they can't afford. We also looked at the data and the effect it was having on communities of color, brought the first civil rights case in the country, recovered tens of millions of dollars for borrowers, got it back to their pockets. And we set up this anti-foreclosure program, stopping tens of thousands of people from being put out of their homes. But I'll tell you what I used to do. I'd get a report every week of the number of consumer complaints coming through on the hotline. You know what that resulted in? $40 million returned to motorcycle owners who were being charged a few $100s more on their premiums. You know, we have these false claims actions. We've returned hundreds of millions of dollars to cities and towns because you know why? When somebody sees a public work project, somebody that the town is contracted with, maybe to haul away trash or something, and they're cutting corners, we love those whistleblowers. Come forward, tell us, and then we can bring the case. And as a result, we've recovered, as I say, hundreds of millions of dollars for cities and towns around the state. And that's work I want to continue to try to do. A reason that I put forward an aggressive plan to deal with for-profit predatory lenders is because of the complaints that I saw starting to come through the office. So public complaints are really important. They are what drive the investigations and enforcement out of the office. Call the hotline, visit our locations in Boston, nearby in Worcester as well, and please let these problems come to the surface. But I certainly will be there as an Attorney General to be guided directly by what I hear on the ground and what my teams hear on the ground.
Okay, so are there any other questions for the attorney? Doug, you got it?
I'll try.
Okay, try again.
I'm really for all the things that both of you talked about on gun control. You know, the bringing in smart guns, technology, and tracing the guns, and all those kind of obvious things, probably to all of us. But even if we implement all of that tomorrow, there are still, I think, literally tens of millions of guns which won't have that technology, which aren't necessarily trackable in the system. And it seems to me that what you really have to start tracking as soon as you can are what I think of as the consumables. You got to know, when you go to a crime scene and find a bullet, we need to be able to trace it back, go back to the manufacturer who made it, find out what retailer they sold it to, and who the end user is and why. And I remember reading years ago that that kind of technology was available for explosive materials at the molecular level. I'm sure it must be available now at the level, you know, for gunpowder. And so those are the consumables that all these new traces and crimes. And I really haven't heard anybody talk about that. I think that's pretty critical.
I couldn't agree with you more. If you go to my website, you'll see my plan on gun violence. One of the things that I call for is for us to start what's called micro-stamping. That's what you're talking about, micro-stamping the bullets. Because remember, when there's a gun crime, a lot of times the gun is leaving the scene. It's the bullet that stays. And that's the way you most effectively solve crimes and trace illegal gun activity. So that is actually part of my plan. But I agree with you. We've got to deal with all the guns that we've got here already in Massachusetts. And you know what? All the guns that we've got coming into Massachusetts from places like New Hampshire and Connecticut and New York. So part of my plan is to also work really comprehensively with other states to combat and crack down on gun trafficking. It's also to do a lot more. I mean, let's look at root causes of violence and what's happening in our communities. Let's get mental health services in place. Let's break cycles of violence within generations of families by getting counseling to younger siblings who've seen and watched older siblings engage in gun activity. We need to do everything we can. This is why I'm a big proponent for closing the loopholes that exist around the resale of guns that already are here in Massachusetts, because currently there are loopholes that exist that allow guns to get into the hands of the wrong people. So you're absolutely right, sir, that we need a comprehensive, multifaceted approach. My approach was endorsed by Jack McDevitt, who's the leading criminologist who's advising the legislature on gun reform. And so I think you're exactly right with your comments.
Thanks for the question, Dick. You're absolutely right. I met with the head of the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in Boston to talk about this very issue. He actually had great things to say about what some of the police forces like Boston are doing. Boston's really ahead of the curve in this regard with the microstamping issue and using all forensic evidence to go after. But there are a lot of other communities that don't have the resource, and this is where the state has to play a role. By the way, not just play a role in helping with some of these technical issues, but also play a role in better training of police. Our police training budget per police officer is third lowest in the country, okay? Third lowest in the country. And when police have an issue with responding to certain issues like domestic violence and the like, I think some of this can be resolved by better training of the police. With regard specifically to the gun issue, you know, I didn't get many Fs in life, but I got an F from the local goals, the Gun Owners Action League, the local chapter of the NRA, because I look at this and I want to deal with this in a very comprehensive fashion. But I don't want you to understate the role that smart gun technology can have. It's not available anywhere in the United States because the NRA sees any step down this path as an infringement on Second Amendment rights. There's no question that this smart gun technology on new guns, and that's all the Attorney General can do. We can't retrofit, force retrofitting. But the idea is simple. Get the technology out there, allow it to be utilized to save lives. Every hour of every day, somewhere in America, a young child is injured as a result of a gun accident in the home. That's what this is about. It's about forcing the gun industry to embrace the technology that is so crucial, Dick, to saving lives. And so that if someone wants to have a gun and they want to have the safest technology, they can get this technology. There was a woman a week and a half ago on the front page of the New York Times. She wanted to sell this technology, had a gun retailer ready to do it. They got gun threats, she got death threats. They both the company backed off, said, no, we're not going to sell this. And all of a sudden she doesn't have a place to sell her guns. The reason they don't want it is they see it, I think they're a little irrational. I'm not trying to take away anyone's guns, I'm just trying to make them safer for all of us. So it's all part of a comprehensive solution. Thanks.
Okay, one more really good question. Anybody have you do?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. It better be good.
Okay, I'll try. I have a question as to what role should the Attorney General play in a recent case, for example, the Pelletier case, where a child is removed from family, a private health maintenance organization decides proper treatment or improper treatment, okay, is able to detain that child without a hearing. What role should the Attorney General play in that, or has it played any at all? Thank you.
Sure. Well, I'm not aware that the Attorney General's played any role in the Pelletier case, but I'll tell you what I would do. I think you hit on this. This is a civil rights issue, something I care a lot about, and I certainly care a lot about the welfare and well-being of children. What I would do is, if I see that kind of struggle going on between a hospital and a family over where their child is going to be cared for and how and under what condition, I'd get in there. I'd roll up my sleeves and I'd take a look at it and talk to the parties and understand what's going on. I think in this instance, we saw a decision by a medical institution, and I respect medical institutions, but I also respect families and parents. And I'd want to find out more what was going on there to see if I could negotiate a resolution that's appropriate in the best interest of the child. Because I think that's where your focus has to be in government. If these issues come before you, what is in the best interest of the child? So that's just my off the top my head thought on that issue.
So this is clearly a place where the Attorney General has a role, particularly with regard to the most vulnerable people in our society, children. DCF is another example where I really have some problems with the way the DCF agency has been handled, and whether the Attorney General should be defending that agency given what it's doing for the most vulnerable members of our society. These are kids that have nobody in the world. With regard to the case specifically, the Pelletier case specifically, you have a diagnosis from Children's Hospital that says X. and that's what the state seemed to lean towards. You have a diagnosis from Tufts who suggested it's a mitochondria disease. And, you know, I'm not going to look at the medical records as Attorney General, okay? I'm not going to be able to discern that. But it seems to me there was a legitimate question of two bona fide medical evaluations of that individual. And the state took one and determined that this child should not be with their parents. And I have a hard time with that, absent some indications that the parents are clearly bad parents. So I think this is an instance where the state may have overreached here. I'm glad that the young woman is now on her way back to Connecticut, where she's going to be in the care of the Connecticut agencies. But I don't think the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has covered itself in glory in this instance. And this is an opportunity where a leader in public policy in Massachusetts, the Attorney General, could have stepped up and played a role helping this young woman.
Okay, I'd like to thank Maura and Warren for helping us out today.